All right, today I want to talk to you guys about some of the base principles that are really behind how you make more money on less land and with less work. So this is part of a greater piece of content that is on my website. It's my one-day workshop, and it was filmed at Permaculture Voices 3. You can download that. I'll have the link below. You can purchase it. And this is part of one of the lectures that I do in there entitled $80,000 on a quarter acre, where I basically break down exactly how, and I write down to the bed, I show a basic farm plan of how I would go about making $80,000 on a quarter acre. I'll just show you a little bit of it here. So in this presentation, I'm basically just showing you this is what I would plant, this is where it would go, this is how I'd rotate, and this whole presentation is basically taking you through week by week through an entire season of what it looks like to make $80,000 on a quarter acre. And so I've done this before, and so this presentation is totally based on my own personal experience. So, but what I want to talk about today is the base principles of that. So what are the things that really make it possible to do these things? Strip it right down to the basic philosophy. And where it all starts is the Pareto Principle. I've referred to this many times in many of my different lectures, but I find it really requires reiteration because sometimes it goes over people's heads. And it is the basic idea, the 80-20 rule. This is a cliche. It is referred to throughout business, and it's even referred to in nature. So the Pareto Principle means that 80% of effects will come from 20% of the causes. So some people will tell you that 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. 80% of your revenue will come from 20% of your products. So you can really split this down in many different ways, but it always breaks down to this basic principle of 80-20. And I find what's so important about this, especially when you want to make your farm more profitable on less land, or you want to grow without actually physically growing, understanding this principle thoroughly is absolutely critical to doing that. And so with my farm over the years, the way I've made it more profitable every single year by not farming more land is by doubling down consistently on the things that are bringing the most amount of return. So when you look at this pie graph here, you can see the basic idea is that 20% of causes yields 80% of effects. So if that means that 20% of your customers are bringing you 80% of your business, you want to double down on those people. You want to continuously offer more value to those people. You want to ask those people what are the things that they're looking for that you can improve on, because those are the customers that continue to come back and spend more money consistently every single week than the rest, which might just be people, if you're at a farmer's market, say for example, they might just be people that are passing you by. So you want to continuously offer more value to the people that are spending more with you, essentially. It's quite simple. So what we're looking to do, and this is how I break it down, is that in that 20%, so let's look at that 20% piece of the pie and accept that that is where we want to spend most of our time and our efforts. So we want to concentrate our efforts on those either products or customers. And so in the case of products, it might be that, for example, like many farms like mine, salad mix, even though it might only occupy 20% of your land, it will generate 80% of the revenue of your farm. At least that's how it is in my farm's case, and it was for many years. So concentrating my efforts on those products, concentrating my efforts on those customers, doubling down on them, meaning that next year I might grow more. Next year I might find more ways to add value to those customers, continuously doubling down. Adding value to them as far as customers goes means talking to those customers and figuring out what they want and accommodating them and continuously trying to add value to that group of customers. Another thing that's awesome about this group, this 20% group, is they can essentially become an R&D team for you. So you guys have probably seen videos or in movies where they'll have sort of a, say Coca-Cola is testing a new product, and they'll have a team of people that are basically taste testing, and so those are called focus groups. And your core customers, this 20%, can be a focus group for you, because these people are so much more invested in your farm and what you're doing that they're more likely to give you an honest opinion. And so, for example, at a farmer's market, or even with restaurants or any type of customer you have, when you have a new product, give them samples of that product. Give that to them for free. So somebody comes to your farmer's market and you know them by name, right? So this is part of the doubling down, is that 20% is knowing their names, knowing things about them personally, essentially becoming friends with them, and not in a pretentious way at all. It's just being totally genuine. Because people who shop at your market are generally people you're going to want to talk to anyways. So I'm sidetracking a bit, but you want to look at them as your R&D team, and so give them samples. Like, hey, I'm trying this new salad mix. Here, take a bag of this. When you come back next week, let me know what you think. Those people are far more likely to give you that kind of advice than just some random person that showed up at your market booth. They might not ever come back. So you want to focus on this core group, and that's where they can be your research and development. So you can always use them as a focus group to try new things and ask them their opinion, and they'll be more likely to be honest with you than just some new customer or stranger. So that's the basic idea there. So looking at that other 80%, so this is all the things that we don't need to do a lot of. They're the things or the products that don't generate a lot of revenue. We want to streamline, hasten, mitigate, or eliminate those things altogether. So you can't always eliminate those things, right? So if we're talking about techniques on the farm, there's some things that you have to do. Like, for example, weeding. Weeding isn't a task that generates any type of quantifiable number. We know that it has to get done, but it doesn't have a quantifiable number. Whereas when you go out into the farm and you harvest something, that has a quantifiable return. Even when you plant or prepare beds to be planted on your farm, that has a quantifiable return, because you can say, oh, if I plant 10 beds of this, I can expect this return. So, but weeding, for example, doesn't have that quantifiable return. And so this really correlates into something I've said many times in the past, is focus on the tasks that pay. As far as things that you do on your farm, you want to focus on planting, harvesting, and marketing. Those are the three things that have a quantifiable return. So planting, like I said, you go plant a certain amount of beds, that can have an expected return. Harvesting, you go out in the field for an hour and you harvest a bunch of vegetables, that has a quantifiable return. Marketing, if I deliver to this many restaurants, it has this quantifiable return. If I stand at a farmer's market for this long, it has this much of a quantifiable return. So you always want to double down on those tasks and try to eliminate everything else. Understanding that, like I said, with weeding, we can't necessarily eliminate weeding, but what we can do is streamline and hasten and mitigate it, right? So you might not be able to get all 4 of these, but you can get maybe 2 out of 4 or 3 out of 4, and you want to apply that to everything that doesn't really bring that net return that you see. And so in the case of products, you might like to grow potatoes on your farm, but when you really look at the numbers, they might only generate $1,000 a year, and then you look at how many hours you spend to plant those potatoes, and I'm just using this as a hypothetical example because potatoes might be profitable for somebody else, but you might look at that and say, well, based on the number of time that we put into this and the return, we're making $2 an hour planting potatoes. But then you might look at salad greens or microgreens or cherry tomatoes, like crops that I grow, and you might go, okay, based on the time input, there's a high return. So it's really using this as a framework to understand what is profitable and what isn't, and again, concentrate efforts on the things that are, and reduce or mitigate or eliminate the things that don't. And so I'm speaking in broad terms because this can apply differently for everybody, because I'm not here to say that you have to farm the way I do, growing salad greens and cherry tomatoes and microgreens, to make your farm profitable. It all depends on where you are. It depends on your market. It depends on your own context. So that's why I'm trying to explain this as a base principle that you can apply to your own situation. So that, in a nutshell, is how the 80-20 works. And I want to explain one more part of this that isn't necessarily the 80-20, but it's a way on how we optimize our effectiveness on the farm. And the whole basic idea here is to abandon the idea of perfection. A lot of people who get into business and farming, they want everything to be perfect all the time. And that is an endless it's a pointless and endless thing that you're going to chase that you'll never achieve. Nothing will ever be perfect. And what I have found is this graph here really demonstrates the optimum effectiveness of pretty much everything. So take, for example, if you take a cup of water, so this is my coffee cup, but if you fill up a cup of water underneath a tap, it'll fill up really quickly, but the top 20% of it is usually bubbles. And then in order to get that cup right to the top, you have to slow the tap down, and then you spend the same amount of time getting that last 20% as you did on the 80%. And so that is just a metaphor to understanding why perfection is not really worth the time. So on this graph, we have time on the bottom, and we have effectiveness or quality on the left. And so this describes that glass of water. Is in 50% of the time we can get to 80% full. But then it's going to take another 50% of the time to make up that last 20%. And so I'm not saying that you should do everything 80%. It might be 85, it might be 75, it might be 95. It depends on where you are. It depends on the task specifically. But following this as a basic principle to say, when is it good enough that the average person isn't going to notice? Because most people don't notice the difference between 80% quality and 100% quality. And there's the odd person that probably does, but you need to look at that rationally and say, okay, what is it worth? If only one customer out of 100 notices the difference between 80 and 100% quality, is it worth it to make that every single customer happy opposed to 99 of them? And again, I'm speaking of that broadly because it can be applied in many different situations in many different contexts. But the basic idea is that often 80% is good enough. For example, when we're bagging salad mix for the farmer's market and we're selling 4-ounce bags and you fill 5 ounces in the bag, good enough. 4.5 ounces, good enough. To sit there and put the bag on the scale and then weigh it multiple times, take out a little, add a little bit more, it's not worth the time, especially when you quantify the fact that you're going to do that thousands of times, if not tens of thousands of times in a year. So it's not really worth your effort. Generally, we always try to go over, right? So if I'm going to bag something that's 4 ounces, I don't want to put 3.5 ounces in there. I'd rather there be 4.5 ounces. So in that specific case, we're always trying to go over. But you just need to figure out what's good enough, and you can apply this principle to anything you do on the farm, whether it's preparing beds. I see some farmers, they're preparing their garden beds or their farm beds, 30-inch beds like we use on the farm, and they're string lining everything, and everything has to be exactly perfectly straight. It's like, where is it good enough, right? What difference does it make if the bed isn't totally straight? Can you actually measure that difference? You probably can't. So that's why, like say in that case, it's 80% good enough. Call it a day. So that is the basic idea behind this, you guys, and like I said, we've applied this to every single thing we do on the farm. Where's the good enough factor, and where's the 80-20 where we can double down and concentrate our efforts on that 20%. So these are the base principles on what I've applied to make everything on our farm more streamlined, and how we continue to make more money on the same amount of land without growing our farm. Hope you guys have found that helpful. If you want to see more stuff like this, please hit the subscribe button right now. Like and share these videos with your friends, and check out the links below where I have a link to This Is a Greater workshop, which if you like this, you'll find very helpful. All right, talk to you later.